We are recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this AIM Center webinar. This is Luis Perez. I'm a technical assistant specialist with the National AIM Center. We're so glad that you're here with us this afternoon, and we really look forward to presenting this webinar. Before we get started with the content, I just want to take care of a few housekeeping items. So number one, we have captioning that's available. In Zoom, there is a closed caption option. Just look for that in the interface, usually along the bottom of the screen. And want to acknowledge Shana from ACS Captions, who's providing the captioning today. So we really appreciate that service that you provide for us, Shana. And we hope that that will be helpful to those of you who are accessing this video today, this webinar. The other thing is we want this to be more of a conversation. And so we'll be relying on the text chat that's available in Zoom. Now, one tip for you all is before you send your message, you want to make sure that you access the pull down menu and choose all panelists and attendees. If you don't do that, you may be sending your message to an individual person, but the rest of the chat won't be able to see it. And I am sure that all of you have amazing resources to share and lots of insights, depending on where you're based and what's been going on in your districts or whatever setting you work in. So make sure that you select all panelists and attendees, and that way everybody can see what you're posting in the chat. And then finally, just a reminder, since this came up during our pre-show banter, this webinar is being recorded, and a link will be available within a week or so on the webinar event page. And so the short URL, Leslie's going to drop that into the chat, is This Is Ed AEM series. And so you should see that link come through in the chat in just a second. But there you'll be able to access the recording for this webinar and other resources such as the slides that we're using.
So there's a request already to repeat the directions on viewing the chat. So if you don't have the chat window open, at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon that looks like a thought bubble. You want to click that one, and that should open the chat if you don't have the chat window open. And then to repeat what Luis said, at the bottom of that chat window, make sure in the to space, it says all panelists and attendees.
Absolutely. Thanks for flagging that for us, Lynn. All right, so that wonderful voice you just heard, that's Lynn McCormack, and I have the pleasure of working with her at CAST. We're both on the AIM Center team. So Lynn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Luis. So yes, my name is Lynn McCormack, and I work at CAST at the home office here in Wakefield, although I am not at the home. I'm at the home office today here, also in Wakefield, Massachusetts. I'm the senior technologist on the AIM Center, as well as I work on an additional project, the Sizzle project, which we'll talk about later in the presentation today. As well as I mentioned earlier that I'm working with the Massachusetts here right now on our Digital Learning Advisory Council. So we've been working with districts around the state who are dealing with the issues of going online and equity and thinking about their students. So I want to be thinking about all those things today as we move through our presentation. Thanks.
Great. And always a pleasure to present with you, Lynn. Yeah. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Luis Perez. I'm a technical assistant specialist on the AIM Center. I have a long history of working in the field of assistive technology, universal design for learning, mobile learning initiatives, working with pre-service and in-service teachers in higher education. So I've done this work for a while, and I'm also wearing a different hat. I mean, I do wear a lot of hats because I'm missing a lot of my hair, as you can see from the photo. But I'm also bringing to this work today a different hat, which is I'm also a user of a lot of the technologies that we're going to be talking about because I have low vision. I'm a person with a disability. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which means I don't have peripheral vision. So I rely on a number of these options to allow me to access information. So I am going to turn it over to Lynn in just a second, and she's going to talk to us about Sizzle, which is another great initiative. But I just want to review the objectives for today, just to make sure we're clear on our expectations. So we're hoping that at the end of this webinar, you'll be able to use a number of CAST tools, which Lynn is going to talk about, to explore reader preferences. And that's really important, that, this is all about preferences, and that one setting, one option does not work for everybody, because we bring a lot of variability to the learning experience. So how do we find those preferences that are a good match for that variability? Then we're going to look at some supports for customizing the display of information and making digital materials accessible in a variety of ways, such as changing the text size, adjusting the colors, and so on. And then finally, along the way, we're going to look at some free text-to-speech supports across different platforms. So I'm going to look at iOS. I'm going to look at the Chromebook or Chrome, Google Chrome, and then Windows as well. So trying to give you a range of options. We try to be technology or platform agnostic at the AIM Center and really focus on a range of different supports, which is really important, because we don't know where learners are going to end up in the future. So we want to give them a robust toolkit that will adjust to different circumstances. And so we're coming to you in the context of a current crisis where there has been a sudden shift from in-face or in-person education to online learning. And a lot of these tools will be helpful in that context, because our learners are now at home trying to access information and trying to access their learning. So that's sort of the backdrop to the content that we're going to be addressing today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn in just a second. But before I do that, we have a great resource, and we could have prepared a handout for you, but the handout was already on our website. So the handout or the section of the website that we're going to be referencing today is bit.ly, bit.ly, AEM personalizing. And so that's a section that we put together where, again, it's separated into display options and text-to-speech. So all of those supports are discussed in more detail, and we cover all of the different platforms. And we try to stick to tools that are either free or low cost, or may already be available in your district, because a lot of districts get subscriptions to some of these tools. All right, so I've been kind of queuing you up, Lynn, so I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Luis. So we're going to go to page 8. I'm not sure who's doing the...
There, I got
Super. You. Excellent. So in addition to working on the AIM Center, I also work as a software engineer primarily on the Center for Inclusive Software for Learning, or as we affectionately term, the CISL project. And in that project, we're working both with CAST, SRI, and IDRC. So the group of us are working together, and we're thinking about learner differences and how to support students with disabilities, and how do we make an appropriate learning environment for students at the margins. And so we're really developing according to the principles of universal design for learning. We are targeting students at the margins, and by doing that, we are hoping to create a learning environment that is better for all students. We're also committed for this to be open source, and that has its challenges in that a lot of great things are commercial, so making sure that we use the best of open source. We are not only in the process of building, but we're also working to influence other tools. So it may be that we have tools in here, but if we could influence a Pearson or another publisher to actually include the features that we have in our tool, we're hoping as well. That's also a win for our project. So both building, influencing, and partnering with other folks as well. So next slide, please. Excellent. So on our website, which we showed the homepage of our website, which is sizzle.cast.org, you can find research on reading features that we're going to talk about today in this webinar. And so if you think about it, there are so some of the features are adjustable line spacing, adjustable letter spacing, and text size. So all three of those features have research on them that how they might impact your students. You can take a look at the research that's available. For instance, if you have adjustable line spacing, it may help students with dyslexia for accuracy. Some of these features apply to speed, the rate at which learners are able to actually consume the materials. They may also impact the readability of the materials as well as the rate that they're able to move through those materials. So you'll be able to find research on those three features. Font choice as well, it has some conflicting research. And so inside our tool, we provide for a range of fonts that students can use, but including Comic Sans and Open Dyslexic, as well as the serif font. And really what we find is that students have preference for these, and they have preferences for fonts in specific reading modalities. So for instance, they may have a different preference for a novel that they're curling up to read, and that would be different than the preference they might have for, I need to get through this material for my exam that I have tomorrow, or this is the first time that I'm encountering material. And so the challenges that go with each of those modalities. Color and contrast, another feature, thinking about that, and that helps potentially with character identification, so being able to modify those for your preferences. Read aloud as well, and I'm going to contrast read aloud with being able to have a screen reader. So some people are familiar with those differences, but I'll just take a second to compare and contrast. Read aloud in general is not for folks that are blind or low vision. Read aloud is really having the ability to read the text for you. In general, read aloud is best for students, or is most appropriate for students that are looking for supports in actually reading the text itself. Oftentimes, students that are reading below grade level would be using read aloud, especially good for ELL, or anybody with tired eyes might want to use read aloud or text to speech, and contrast that with JAWS or some of those other actual reading features for folks, or tools for folks that actually cannot see or have very low vision, that they need both the ability to read, but also move through the functionality of the page. So those are two different things. Luis, did you want to make any clarifications on that? Okay, great. And so then the next piece is glossary, thinking about glossary. And so glossary is really providing specific vocabulary support for the content that you're working on. And I'll compare and contrast glossary with just a dictionary. So I can go to the dictionary and I can look up any word, but it might be that within specific text, there's historical information or a definition or a particular use of a word. So the glossary is really context specific type of support that you can have. And so it can provide support for vocabulary goals, or it could also provide support for context background that your learners might be missing. And so there's research on that as well. And there's also comprehension checks. And so there's research on how comprehension checks can be used with your learners. And then the last part here is automated text simplification. And automated text simplification is actually still quite a challenge. Over the next year, we will be working significantly on how automated text simplification happens. Right now, we are using the Newsela approach. So if folks are many folks have used Newsela, and in Newsela, they have a team of folks that are out there rewriting content at different levels for students to be able to use that. So in our system, we have 3 levels for our articles that we have in, and we'll show you in a minute. We have 3 levels, and that's been done from a human perspective. Human has been in the loop. What we're thinking about moving forward is the potential for as doing this in steps. And so automated text simplification right now will likely not produce for you student-ready, high-quality materials. So what folks will find, and what educators have been telling us, is that oftentimes when the content gets reduced and simplified, that sometimes the vocabulary words are missing that they're trying to actually learn in class, or that concepts are missing from there. So we've been very careful to do this in a way that is human generated, because we're not quite there yet, but we will absolutely be working on that over the next year. And so Luis just took up the inclusive learning environment itself. And so the preferences panel on there is highlighted. And so when you're thinking about tools over the next week or so, or you're thinking about them right now, think about this capacity for students to personalize their learning. So on there, you'll see things, the text size, the line spacing, letter spacing, the fonts that are available, and the color. We actually only have 3 color themes right now, because what we were finding is when you give the students so many options, the learners can potentially make choices that don't actually make sense. So when you give every option for text and every option for colors of backgrounds, you could in fact pick the same color for your text and your background, and then you end up with a screen that you can't identify anything on it. So we have 3 themes right now that we're working with, and that's what we have, because we're finding that that's the most usable with our students right now. And then the last feature that you'll see there on that the screen, is the word lookup links. And I like that because that's our first start into helping the learners think about, how do I own my environment? So what features do I want to turn on and turn off, so that I can be thinking about, how do I gain ownership? How do I gain meta about my learning environment? And that's one of the things that we're thinking about on the inclusive reader. So I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more, or give you a chance to take a look at this at inclusive.cast.org.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for that overview. So a few questions came through in the chat. I want to make sure that we're all clear. So the Center for Inclusive Software for Learning, that can be found at CISL, CISL.cast.org. And then there is a research page, and that's where you'll find a summary of the research into some of these features that Lynn just provided us with such a nice overview of. And then the inclusive environment, this is where you can try out some of those features. So that is inclusive.cast.org. So again, that's an environment where you can try out things like the different fonts, the different spacing options, text size, glossary, and so on. So we're not going to have a time today to do a demo of Inclusive, but again, this is something you can sign up for a free account, right, Lynn?
Yes, yep. You can sign up. Well, you can use it without even having an account. So it's openly available. So
we encourage you all to take that for a spin, and then it's something that we want to co-design. So, your feedback is definitely welcome as part of that project. So I will pause here, see if there are any other questions coming through the chat. I think those were the main ones. A reminder, if you're joining us late, this is being recorded. The recording will be made available in about a week. It will be on the same page where you register for the webinar. And there you'll find the recording with closed captions, as well as the slideshow and other resources.
And Luis, just so that you know, as this has all changed many of our focus and what we're working on right now, the current situation, we on the CISL Center are working feverishly behind the scenes to populate more and more articles into this, so that we'll have a larger repository of materials for learners to use. So
great. So not only will you have access to some features that you can try out, but there will also be some content that you can use to support learners during this difficult time. So I am going to shift gears here, and now we're going to get into some demos. But whenever I present some of the features that Lynn just talked about, and some of the ones that I'm going to demo, I always come back to this metaphor of a bicycle, and more specifically, the idea of an adjustable seat, or what I call an adjustable seat for learning. So with a bicycle, right, we don't buy a bicycle for people that are really tall, and we don't buy a bicycle for people that are on the short side. We just buy a bicycle with an adjustable seat, and then people are able to adjust it to meet their specific needs. And so that's how I think about these technologies that we're going to look at today, is that they provide that adjustable seat for learning, changing the text size, adjusting the colors. Those are all like moving that seat up and down until we meet until we put ourselves in the optimal position for learning, if you will. So I want to kick off with that, leave that in your minds as we look at some of these features. So what we're going to look at today, first, we're going to look at personalizing reading on an iPad. Of course, we can't cover all of these features, so I just selected a few that I felt would be a good starting point. So there are a number of built-in features on iOS. So iOS is the operating system that runs on not only your iPad, but also your iPhone. And so we're going to look at Safari Reader. This is a feature built into the Safari web browser on iOS devices, and it allows you to sort of remove clutter so that you have a clean presentation of a web page. And that can really benefit individuals who might be easily distracted by ads and too much navigation around the content. And then we're going to look at some of the text-to-speech features that are available as a built-in option. And then depending on time, we're going to look at a few apps for actually reading books on your device. One being the built-in Books app. It used to be called, I think, iBooks at one point, but now it's just called Books. And then Dolphin Easy Reader. And I'm highlighting Dolphin Easy Reader because in addition to being free, it's a great way to access Bookshare books. So if you don't know about Bookshare, I definitely encourage you to find out more. It's a free service for qualifying students. I actually purchased into Bookshare as an adult. I'm not a student anymore, but there is the option to also purchase membership. And it's one of the best things that I do every year is renew my Bookshare subscription because that's the way that I access most of my books. So Dolphin Easy Reader can tap right into Bookshare. So we'll look at that as well in that context. We'll then look at personalizing reading on a Chromebook. We know that Chrome is really popular in education. And so we're going to look at a few options that are available as extensions. So extensions are in some ways equivalent to the apps that you install on an iPad or an iPhone, except that they just impact the current website in the Chrome web browser. And they sit on the toolbar of your browser, and you can use them to change the appearance or use text-to-speech with a current web page that you're looking at. So we're, again, mentioning Bookshare. We're going to look at their web reader that's available for reading Bookshare books right inside of Chrome. And we're going to look at a couple of other extensions. Helperbird is one that I just became familiar with that I really like. And then, of course, TextHelp, which it has a read and write extension that a lot of school districts may already own as part of a subscription. And by the way, we have TextHelp is a partner with the AIM Center. So you'll find Read Aloud is available throughout our website, and that's provided by TextHelp. So we're really appreciative of that. And then finally on Windows, Microsoft has been doing some really great things with their learning tools collection. And specifically, I want to call out the immersive reader. And so this is available on the Edge web browser, but also within Microsoft Word, OneNote, and some other tools. So we'll see how far we get with that. So that should give you a pretty robust toolkit to just get started, while at the same time, one of the things that we're mindful about is not becoming overwhelmed. Because in the last few days and the last few weeks, I'm sure you've been getting tons of different lists of tools and resources. So I wanted to limit it to a few that we've used over the years that are pretty robust and are also free. So Lynn, anything you want to add before I start sharing my screen?
Nope, I'm with you though.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. I have 6 screens in front of me, so cross your fingers, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing on one and start sharing on the other one. So let's take a look. So if one of the panelists lets me know, are you able to see my iPad screen?
Yes, I see.
All right, perfect. So I'm on my iPad sharing through Zoom. Unfortunately, the text-to-speech is not going to work. I discovered that just a little while ago, but you can use your imaginations, right? You've all heard text-to-speech before, and you can try this on your own once the webinar is over. So the first thing I want to do is show you where you find the accessibility options on your iOS device. You'll go to Settings. So Settings is this gray icon that looks like it has the gears on it, right? Because you're getting into the guts of the operating system. You'll go to Settings, and then in the past, you had to first select General. and then you had to find accessibility within general. But in iOS 13, Apple kind of rearranged things a little bit. And now accessibility, it's its own category. Yay, clap everybody. We love that. It just brings it more accessibility, more visibility, I should say. It makes it easier to find. So within accessibility, there's tons of different options, which we won't have a chance to cover today. But the one that I want to emphasize and that everyone should know about is spoken content. So about the 6th option from the top under vision, you'll find an option called spoken content. And in here, I generally turn these on every iPad that I touch. There's speak selection and speak screen. So the difference is with speak selection, well, it's in the name. You have to select some text first, and it's just going to speak the selected text. And with speak screen, it reads everything that's on the screen. So that means all of the buttons, all of the controls, everything that's on the screen that's visible is spoken aloud with speak screen. And then there is a new feature in iOS 13. You'll notice that there is a little icon that I can move around. That is our speech controller. And that's brand new. That means that no matter where you are, with a single tap, you can bring up your speech controls. So you can tap play, you can navigate around, and you can change the speaking rate. And then it will hide itself after a few seconds. So right below speak screen, that's where you turn on this feature, the speech controller. And I generally have that on all the time because I am a big user of text-to-speech on my iOS devices. So again, you can move it out of the way. It will sort of fade a little bit if you're not using it. If it's not active, you can see that right now. And so that it doesn't get in the way too much. And then the other thing you want to do is turn on the highlighting. So there's an option there for highlight content. We want to make sure that's turned on because the highlighting can be helpful. So you're listening to the content, but you're also able to follow along with line by line and word by word highlighting. So that's where you find these options, right, in settings. And I encourage you to explore those a little bit. And there's my dog, just in case. Perfect timing. There must be a delivery. Also, he gets, he wants to make an appearance on every webinar. All right, so I'm going to exit out of settings, and then I'm going to show you how to use these features. So I'm going to bring up my web browser, and we're going to go to the AIM Center, where you should all be at some point today. And first, I want to show you speak selection. So with speak selection, what you'll do is you'll tap and hold on any word on the page. And then when you let go, you'll see these handles appear. And then what you do is you draw a selection. And if you have this option turned on in settings, you're going to see speak available as part of that menu that pops up. And then you can choose speak. Now, again, my apologies, you're not going to hear the text-to-speech. So in your mind's eye, imagine that there is a synthesized voice speaking. So I'll tap speak. And then it starts highlighting the text as it reads it aloud. I can pause it. I can tap speak again. So this is great if you just want to listen to parts of a page or parts of an email. But if you want to hear the entire contents of the screen, you can bring up the speech controller and tap play. And that's the equivalent of activating speak screen. So again, that's going to mention every item that's on the toolbar, the navigation, everything that's visible on the screen. And then you can see that there's an option here for changing the speaking rate from 1x to 2x. Now, I use text-to-speech all the time, so I have it set to 2x, so it's pretty fast for me. And then brand new feature in iOS 13, you can tap the little finger icon. Hopefully you can see that. And now I can speak on touch. So I just move my finger around, and whatever's underneath my finger, that's what's being read out loud until I lift it and I let go. So I always tell people, begin with what's built in. So you have speak selection, speak screen. These are built in. You don't have to install anything. It's right there on your device. You just have to go into settings and turn it on. And then you can use that on websites, on ebooks, on different types of content that's accessible. So the next feature I want to share with you, because our students are going to be on the web quite a bit, is something called Safari Reader. And Safari Reader, again, it's built into the web browser. There's nothing to install. whenever you get to a website that supports Safari Reader, and I'm going to use my icon here as a pointer. Here's the web address at the top of the screen. And then to the left of that, you'll see an icon that looks like a letter A, or two letter A's, right? Small a, little a. So here's what you do. You tap on that icon and then select Show Reader View, and watch what happens. Magic. It goes through and it takes that page and it removes all the ads. It removes all of the blinking content, all the navigation. So now you're just focused on the text and some images. And then if you tap that icon again, you have a bunch of appearance options, including some that Lynn already mentioned earlier. So for instance, you can come in here and you can change the text size. You make it bigger. You can make it smaller. Tap the icon again, you can choose different fonts. And my favorite one is the San Francisco font that Apple specifically designed to be very clear on these Retina displays that are available on these devices. Or you can choose options like different color schemes. So for instance, a sepia background may be helpful for some learners. Or a night view, so that if you're reading along with your partner at night, you're not lighting up the entire room with your screen, because this dims the display a little bit. So it's just a gray background on light text. Or you can go all the way to high contrast. And this is what I use a lot of the time, so that I have a black background with white text on top of it. Here's what's really cool. If you tap on website settings, you can choose to use this feature automatically. So now whenever I go to the AIM Center website, it's always going to be cleaned up for me with this option. And then if I go into settings for Safari, there's an option to do it for all websites. So every time you're on the web, if a website supports this feature, again, not all of them do, you'll be able to turn this on and clean things up a little bit. Similar features are available in Apple's books. So this is the e-reader application. So you can see if I tap the letter A's, the big A, little a, I will find the same options: the text size, the color schemes, and the font selection. So that's built into that e-reader app. And then lastly, on the iPad, I mentioned Dolphin's Easy Reader. This is my preferred app for reading ebooks from Bookshare because it's free and it also has a lot of options built into it. So what I will do is go into the icon, and again, I'm going to use a shortcut here. I'm going to point to the icon with my speech controller. It's in the upper left corner. You'll see what looks like a series of books. If you tap that icon, it brings up your sources. And one of those sources is Bookshare. So all I would have to do here is just log into Bookshare, and then I would be able to access my collection of books. Now, this is really customizable. If you tap the letter A at the top of the screen, you probably know what that's going to do. It's going to bring up all of your options like text size, margins, line spacing, letter spacing. So this adds a few things that the built-in options don't have, right? So margins are really important for me because I don't have peripheral vision. And so I prefer to have big margins where I bring the text in so that it's within my peripheral vision. So you can see I have the maximum for the margins there. There's more color themes here than you would have with the built-in options. So the background color, the sentence highlight, lots more than what's built in. And then I can also customize my speech settings. So I could either adjust the speaking rate, or I could even purchase additional voices that are commercial voices. They're even better quality than what's already built in. You have a table of contents. So if you go to the lower left-hand corner, you can bring up a table of contents and you can navigate to different parts of the book. So this is really great for finding just what you need. And then you can also change the navigation options. So if you want to navigate by heading, or if you want to navigate by, the next 15 seconds within the book and so on, you can do that as well. And that's what will happen when I tap the different arrows here. So there are lots of e-reader apps. I just want to share with you one that's free that you could access today, and also one that allows you to access the Bookshare books. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions that I may have missed while I was looking at my screen. So Lynn, can you help me out?
Absolutely. So Luis, there was actually quite a lot of question about the technology you're using to share your iPad. So if you could just explain how your setup is working, because we're helping support folks in their journey in sharing materials with their colleagues and with their learners. So how are you connected to Zoom?
It's a really advanced technology called Zoom. I got the link from Leslie, and then I just launched Zoom on my iPad, and that's it. I'm not using any other screen sharing. I just signed in 3 times. I signed in once with what you're seeing me here. So I'm waving to you all. That's on a Mac. And then my iPad is the second client that I logged into Zoom. And then Zoom has a screen sharing option there as well. So I'm just sharing as a separate client from my iPad. And in a second, you're going to see me share from a third client, which is going to be my Windows laptop. So hopefully that answers those questions. And again, you'll notice I use the speech controller is, it's a feature that it's not really meant to be a cursor, even though there is cursor support now on the iPad. But sometimes when I'm doing demos, I use that to point to different parts of the screen because I know I can move it and then it will move it out of the way when I'm done. Any other questions for me about that?
No, I think there was just a question about how you got to the settings, and I believe that was in the browser where you showed the A, the big A, and the smaller A. It was right there next to the URL. So I think I answered that other question.
Yeah.
But if there was one I didn't, just repeat it. And
yep. And yeah, so just a reminder about that. It typically doesn't work on the homepage of a website. So you have to go a little bit deeper into the website and open up an article or a specific page, and then you should see that icon appear at the top of the screen. So it basically says this website supports reader or this page supports reader. So you won't always see it, but most of the time you will see it nowadays. And then you can tap that big A, little a, and select those options.
And then there was one other question that just came in about an easy reader and whether it identifies the guided reading levels.
That I'm not familiar with. I have not used that feature, but that's something we can research for you and then just post it on the events page.
Yeah,
or if anybody else knows.
Yeah, I do not know for that, but I do want to respond for Sizzle, because in Sizzle, where I was talking about the reading levels that you have, since we are really thinking about how to get learners to own their own environment, we'll make decisions on what reading level and make a recommendation for the students. But the learner will always have the ability to see the other reading levels and switch to those other reading levels. So we feel that that's a really important part of the learning, is learning how you learn best. So,
any other questions? Let's see. You should be able to see my laptop now. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So let's pause here. Take a deep breath. I know I need to take a deep breath. And it's going to be okay. I just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed, because we have these resources on our website. And in fact, I am creating 3 videos that go into each specific platform. So there'll be a video for iOS, one for Chrome, and one for Windows. So you can not only play this recording, this webinar, but you'll have specific videos that you can share with parents, share with other teachers if you just have 5 minutes and you want to learn how to use these features. So deep breath, we will get through this, and we're here to support you in whatever way we can. All right, so I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to look at some Chrome options here. The first thing is one of my favorite extensions. It's called Extensity. And what Extensity does is it allows me to hide and unhide extensions. So it's an extension for extensions. So in here, I've disabled a few of them so that I don't clutter my interface too much. So I want to start with a couple of free extensions that do just a few things, but do it really well. The first one is an extension called Just Read. And what Just Read does is it clears all that clutter. So it's similar to the Reader feature on iOS. And then my favorite option here is there's a print icon, and that's how I use Just Read. So whenever I want to print a web recipe or anything from a website, and I don't want to get the navigation and use up all my printer ink, I will come in here and select Just Read, and then I can tap the print icon, and it will print it without wasting all that ink. To the left of the printer icon, you have a brush. And when you select the brush, you have options for customizing the colors. And so these are the colors that I found work well for me, right? But every learner is different. So I have a off-white background with what looks like a maroon or deep red text color. So that is all customizable. You can come in here and use the color pickers to select the background color, the text color that works best for you, and then choose save and close. And then that will be available each time you activate Just Read. And then to exit out of it, you just click on the X, and that takes you back to the typical view for that website or web page that you're on. And then the other one that I use.
So Luis, there was a question about how they actually get to the extensions.
So extensions is something there is, just like iOS has an app store where you can go and download apps onto your device. There is something called the Chrome Web Store. And so that is similar to an app store, but for Google Chrome web browser. So basically you would, I just do a search on Google for the name of the extension. And one of the first things that pops up is the link to the web store, the Chrome Web Store option where you can install it. Any other questions about how to get this set up? That's a great question. I'm sorry that I skipped over that.
Nope, that's great, Luis. Thank you. And thank you to Leslie for putting in the link.
Yeah, so these extensions, we'll have the links for each of them, but again, they reside in the toolbar for your browser, and these only work on the Chrome version that you run on a computer. So you're not gonna, there is a Chrome browser for iOS devices, but they don't support extensions at this time. So you have to be on a Mac, on Windows, or a Chromebook in order to use these extensions. So that was Just Read. The other one that I use a lot is one called Illuminate. And when I select Illuminate, it gives me a high contrast view. So again, this is something that rests my eyes. It gives me more contrast. But one thing I don't like about most of these high contrast extensions, we spent a lot of time designing these icons at the AIM Center, and now we've lost it because now it looks like it's a negative. Well, if you open up the Illuminate, one of the options is keep images normal. And so now it's just a text that is in high contrast, but the images are not. And so there may be a time where you're looking at a chart or a table and you want to be able to see that without the inversion taking place. And so that's a great option within this Illuminate app, is the fact that you could either turn on keep images or leave them alone, or there's also a smart invert option, but it doesn't always work. So I just have these setting, keep images normal, always enabled. And then when you're done, you can just disable it and it takes you back to your typical view. And then I'm going to look at Bookshare Web Reader. That's the next thing we have on here. So with Bookshare Web Reader, the first thing you'll want to do is, again, sign up for Bookshare and set up your account. I've already done that because I use Bookshare all the time. And one of the books that I'm reading right now is this memoir by Judy Heumann. And whenever you see this Read Now link next to the book, that means you can open it up on the web using the web reader. So I've already done that just to save us some time. But the web reader looks like this. And I have the view where you can have 2 pages at a time. If you go up to the top of the screen, you can open up the settings. And again, lots of options here. Many of the ones that we've already mentioned: text size, font face, text and background color. I love the margins, so I choose a margin, wide margin, so that again, more of the text is in my central vision, and so on. And then you can turn on the text to speech. So there's an option at the top here, and let's give that a shot and see if you can hear it.
9. A note from Judy. For a long time, I resisted the idea of writing my story. Not because
I can pause that. I can bring up the table of contents. So let's say like that. And then I can go to specific parts of the book, or I can type in a page number if I know it. So lots of different navigation options here. And then I also love to go into the full screen mode. So that way I'm removing all those distractions, and then I can really focus on the text. And to clean it up even more, I can hide the toolbar. Now, isn't that nice? It's just the text. It's like you have a dedicated e-reader there with no distractions to take away from the content. So again, I can exit out of those two modes. I can show the toolbar again and then exit full screen mode. So are there any questions about that, the web reader?
There's questions about Bookshare in general. So how do you get a Bookshare account? Who can have a Bookshare account? So if we could spend a minute describing that.
So the best option is go to Bookshare. So bookshare.org, and then they will have information there about how you qualify for Bookshare. So there's two options. You can get a free account if you're a US student. Actually, Bookshare is also available in other countries, but I won't speak to that because I've only done it as a US student. And then there are individual memberships. And so that's where you're no longer a student, but you still want to continue using Bookshare. And so you can buy into that. So I think the best bet in the interest of time is just go to bookshare.org, and they'll have information there about who qualifies for it and how you go about getting access. Typically, you have to be certified by somebody who's qualified. In my case, it was my optometrist. So the person that I go to every year to get my eye exams, he was able to sign something saying that I have a disability that impacts my ability to read print. And so then I was able to get access to Bookshare. I just had to pay for it since I'm no longer a student. Hopefully that clears that up. But if not, again, bookshare.org is your best source. Any other questions coming through, Lynn?
There was just a question about whether it had line adjustments, which I think you showed.
Yep.
I'm not sure.
Yep. So again, just explore the settings. With any of these apps or extensions, if you see a settings option, just go in there because every learner is going to be different. So there is research, which Lynn mentioned, but again, sometimes it's just a matter of preference and what works for one student or another. So what I'm going to do now, in the interest of time, is I'm just going to mention these two real quick because I also want to get to Windows. There's a new extension, new to me at least, called HelperBird. And with HelperBird, it has a reader mode as well. So I can enable the reader mode, and it does the same thing as Just Read, basically. It cleans up the web page so that I now get a nice clean view. It has translation. It has the ability to adjust the zoom level, to choose different fonts. So this is sort of like a Swiss Army knife, if you will, of different accessibility options for literacy. And it has access to the immersive reader from Microsoft. It's built into this extension. I'm not going to cover it here because I'm going to show it to you in Windows in just a second, but just know that that is available within HelperBird if you want to use the immersive reader within Chrome. And then the last one, which I'm just going to mention because a lot of you are probably familiar with it already, is Read and Write for Google. A lot of districts already have a subscription to Read and Write for Google. And in here, the favorite option that I use is the simplification. So I can clean up the page. I can then simplify it so that I'm getting more of a summary, if you will. We went too far there, just 2 lines or 3 lines. So this is dynamic. I can add more details just by clicking the plus or minus. And then I have options for changing the theme, changing the text size, and so on. And of course, I can use text-to-speech while I have this cleaned up version of the website up. So I will be putting up a video real soon with these 5 extensions that goes into much more detail about them. Any questions so far before I jump into the Windows proper, if you will, or the Microsoft tools?
Right, there was just a question about that last one. The last one, the HelperBird, was a Chrome extension, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. It's just that it allows you to use the immersive reader because typically that's only available within Microsoft tools, but they built support for it within HelperBird.
And the other question is, I know you've referred to the videos that you're planning on creating, and I just want to let folks know that those will be available on the AIM Center website when they are available.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep, correct.
Yes.
All right, so let's end with some Microsoft tools. So here I've exited the Chrome web browser, and now I'm within Edge, Microsoft Edge, which is the native browser on Windows devices. So if you have a Surface tablet or a Surface device, this would be your default web browser. So within Edge, there is a reading view, and you'll know that the reading view is available because when you surf to a web page, there's what looks like a book icon, and I currently have my cursor over it. And when you select that option, it does what all these reader support features do, which is clean up the page so that you don't have the navigation and the ads and so on. Then if you click on the page, you can bring up your text options. So you can change the text size, change the colors, and you can also access the read aloud. So let's see if that works.
Personalizing the reading experience. aem.cast.org. 1 minute read.
You can pause it, you can navigate back and forth. You could also choose a different reading speed, and you can also choose different voices. So you have a choice of, I think, just 1 female and 2 male voices. We need to even that out, Microsoft, 2 and 2. And then when I'm done, I can tap the X and close the read out loud options there. But my favorite thing here is if you go to the learning tools option, man, you can spend a few hours here trying out some of these settings. You can adjust the text spacing. So that's, let's pretend we're at the eye doctor. 1 or 2, 1 or 2. So all that does is it adds additional spacing, and that can be helpful for some readers. And then you can add overlays in different colors. So in the past, maybe you had an acrylic sheet that you put over the text. Well, it's like doing the same thing, but for digital text here. So let's turn that back to normal there, or the typical view. Under grammar, you can break the words apart by their syllables. You can highlight different parts of speech using different colors. And you can even show labels. So for instance, now I have the nouns highlighted in different colors and with the letter N above them. Let's turn those off. And then finally, under the reading preferences, you can turn on line focus. And that just gives you a ruler, which for somebody like me with no peripheral vision, this really helps me out to track where I am on the page as it's reading out loud. And you have options there for how many lines are visible at a time. So this is in the Edge web browser. You have similar features within Microsoft OneNote. So that's a note-taking app that a lot of people are using. And then a subset of these features are also available within Microsoft Word. So, they're in different places within each of these tools, and they're called something different. Sometimes it's called learning tools, sometimes immersive reader. But just know that it's your preferences for color, text, fonts, and read aloud. So I'm going to pause there, and then I'm going to turn it back to all of you and see if there are any other questions that we didn't get to that we can answer. Let me stop sharing on my laptop here. And I think the gods were with us today, the technology gods. Nothing has failed yet, other than we couldn't get text-to-speech on the iPad. But if that's the only thing that goes wrong, I'm pretty happy with all of this.
Yeah, and there was a suggestion in the chat about how you can get that to work, that text-to-speech to actually send the sound through Zoom. So we'll have to play with that as well.
Yep, it's just I tried it here and I was just getting a lot of echo, and I didn't want you all to be upset with me with all the echo. So I'm always trying to pay attention to your experience. Let's see.
There's a question now about a good audio reader for EPUB books.
So I'm so glad you brought that up. So the best e-reader for EPUB on Windows used to be Edge. Unfortunately, recently Microsoft switched Edge so that it now runs Chromium. So Edge and Chrome, those two web browsers, they're basically running the same engine. And unfortunately, when Microsoft Edge went to Chromium, they dropped support for EPUB. So Lynn, what suggestions do you have if you're on Windows? Because we know on iOS devices, we can use books, we can use Dolphin Easy Reader. If you're on Chrome or on Windows, then what are some options?
So the one that I've been using is the Thorium EPUB reader. That's the one actually that will work across the different devices. So it'll work on both Windows and Mac. So if you're trying to support diverse hardware, then that one is one that's good because it's free, it's downloadable, and it works on both of those environments. So that's the one that I've been using. The other thing is that the EPUB as a standard is the standard that we're using for Sizzle. So we are hoping to be able to consume more and more EPUBs because they are in a standard format.
Yeah, and it's a format that's been designed from the ground up to have excellent accessibility support. You know, PDF was great when what we wanted to do was take something and print it out and get an exact copy of it. But it's not a great experience, especially if you're on a mobile device. With PDF, you know, it's difficult to navigate in terms of zooming in, especially. So I typically, when I see something that's in PDF, I know that I'm in for not so great experience on mobile. So EPUB allows you to reflow the text. So basically, when you're on a small screen, it will adjust the text so that it reflows around images and other elements, and so that you don't have to pan around. You can still access the text without having to pan, which can really slow you down in terms of the reading experience.
So this question that just came in is really important. It says, I'm looking for an app that can make worksheets be read aloud on both an iPad and on Chrome. What can I use? So this is that's quite a question. I'm going to lob that to you, Louise.
Oh, thanks, Lynn. So I have an app for you. That you should check out. It's called Office Lens. And it's something I won't have time to demo, but it's a great app for you to digitize analog content. So if you have some text that you need to scan, Office Lens will allow you to scan it and then perform the optical character recognition. So that basically goes in and recognizes each individual letter and turns it into actual text that then assistive technology can process and read out loud. And it has immersive reader built into it. So once you have it in the digital format, you can perform all those transformations that we've been showing you.
Yeah. And making sure that that content, if that content is a worksheet that's in paper, then you are going to have to get it into a format that actually has been OCR'd or have the characters recognized so the computer understands that. So the other thing that could possibly do that is the text help toolbar, which we didn't demo that feature on it. But if you're using that text help toolbar in the browser on either an iPad or in Chrome, then that has the capacity to screenshot and then read areas of that that document.
Yeah, but then there's also the question of, you know, the worksheet itself. We work at CAST, so we're always thinking about engagement, so not just accessibility. So it's important to consider, like, is that the most engaging experience for the learner? And in some cases, you do need a worksheet, because I've been a language learner, right? So there is a place for them, but we also always consider engagement as well. And I know Lynn is going to say something about that.
Well, I'm just laughing because I definitely, I'm not a huge fan of worksheets in general, but somebody said, give me more worksheets, said no student ever. So I apologize for laughing at that, but it did hit me as a UDL sort of follower. But of course, there are worksheets that can be made in a way that are in fact engaging. So absolutely. I don't want to judge all worksheets in that way.
And like I said, there is a place for them, just like there is a place for, say, a mini lecture in direct instruction. It always comes down to what's the goal and what's the appropriate method and tool, and then providing options and choice. So we're about to run out of time. These great conversations, and then we run out of time. But guess what? Let me see if I can get back to my device here. I lost my cursor, so I spoke too soon about the tech gods.
Oh, no.
Let me, Leslie, can you stop the sharing on my Windows laptop? Because I don't have a cursor there.
Okay, that should be, hold on, let's see if I can. Hold on.
So that I can share from my desktop. Let's see.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, perfect. I can bring up my other computer. And I just wanted to mention that we have a small task for you. So if you want to take some of what you've learned on this webinar, whether you're here in person or online, we have two options for you. Number one is you can explore Clusive. So go to clusive.cast.org. And then we want you to explore the preferences there and then just come to our office hours, which I'll mention when those are going to be in just a second. But come to our office hours with questions about Clusive and some of those preferences. And then option B is to visit our Personalizing the Reading Experience the section of our AIM Center website. And then just select some of those tools that we haven't mentioned today and just spend some time exploring them and trying them out on different types of content. And then again, come to us with any questions that you have for our office hours. So that gives you something to work with so that we'll have more focused time during our office hours, which are going to be tomorrow from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And then we're all about providing choices. So on Thursday, April 2nd, from 4 to 5:30 p.m. So I will be online. I may be joined by other characters from CAST, but we'll be there to answer questions that you have or demo other things. So if you saw something today and you want me to go over it again, I'll be happy to do that with you tomorrow and Thursday. And then our next webinar is going to be all around video, how to create high quality and accessible video. And so we'll see you right back here virtually on Monday, April 6th at the same bat time, same bat channel, same bat time of 3 p.m. Eastern. So with that, I am going to bring the webinar to a close, but we do want your feedback. So we have a brief survey that we would love for you to complete. And Leslie's going to drop that link into the chat, but just in case, it's bit.ly/distance ed webinars #1. So we appreciate your feedback always. We're striving to make this better experience for you and provide content that's as relevant as possible to the work that you're doing, especially during this difficult time. So Lynn, any final thoughts from you?
No, but I just want to say thank you to Shannon, our captioner. We didn't acknowledge Shannon, our captioner. You did a great job today, so thank you so much for helping us out. And thank you to all our participants today. Your time is valuable, and we're so glad that you chose to spend this time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shanna. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Lynn and Leslie and the whole team. And thank you all for your contributions of your questions and your comments in the chat. So I will go ahead and stop the webinar, but we hope to see you right back here next week for another AIM Center webinar. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.